I think No Jumper actually has, and this is a testament to you, I don't think No Jumper is a hip-hop platform. I don't.
We're bigger than that. I agree.
think that No Jumper...
We're largely hip-hop adjacent and based on.
I think No Jumper is a pioneer in what I call WIC. Weird internet culture. And that's not a diss. That's a combination of hip-hop, gang culture, tattooed white boys, porn, all of that. There's actually no platform like No Jumper.
Everything that I'm
Jumper.
interested in gets thrown in the gumbo
Right.
pot.
So there's no platform like No Jumper except No Jumper. Cool. I personally don't think that I don't think that when you say move culture and interviews that move culture, I wouldn't think that I would look at No Jumper as a place that moves culture.
Entire internet is talking about this gay Crip right now.
But
I didn't even have anything to do with it.
What is it?
Rick Baby and Crip Max sit down with him. It sparked a massive conversation about homosexuals and gangs.
I know, like, bruh.
I helped orchestrate that, even though I didn't know it was happening.
Bruh, but like, I just be honest with you. Like, talk your shit, but no.
Yes.
Like, not the whole internet is not talking about that. And that's
shade. Huge.
And
you're on a different part of the internet.
And that's not a shade to Brick Baby. Because I will say this, you do have a good eye for talent. Because when people come in here, and that's just real, when people come in here, when I'm watching Brick Baby, and I'm watching, what's the brother that's with Brick Baby when you interview, like, excuse me, the guy that sits sometimes and he's with Brick Baby, is you, Brick Baby, and it's another guy that I see with Brick Baby sometimes. Am I tripping?
I don't know.
Like a darker skinned guy.
Dub.
Okay.
Dub, right.
When I see those guys,
wasn't thinking about the No Jumper show. Okay.
Right, but when I see those guys, the guys that come in here and normally sit down and do their thing, like, it's dope. Like, I always see, Adam knows how to spot someone that's good to even come in. Like Flacco. Like, there's something about Flacco. Flacco has something to where you're like, oh shit. And a lot of times Flacco be having trouble getting this shit out, but you still stick with Flacco. There's something there. So I'm not saying you're not talented, but I'm saying, like, when you say I am one of the greatest hip-hop podcasters ever, like, you say you're the greatest hip-hop podcaster.
I wouldn't say the greatest. That's a lot.
Okay, so who's in give me your top 5 hip-hop podcasts.
Current? We got to do current.
Nah, just all time.
Oh, well, okay. Vlad's got to be in there.
Okay.
I am hesitant to throw Ack in the top 5 because as I feel like he's incredible at what he does. He's very, very good. He's somebody I look up to in terms of the art form. But not traditionally a podcast. Well, he's only been doing it for a couple of years, so I feel like maybe. Okay. But I have to put him right up there. I do look at Joe Budden and Charlemagne, even though I don't think of Joe Budden as an interviewer, and I don't think he's necessarily the best interviewer.
But we didn't say interviewer.
Certainly what he's built as a podcaster, you got to give it to him.
See, even the fact that you would hesitate Well,
because when I'm talking about academics as a podcaster, I'm talking about him as an interviewer.
Right. And it's about more than that, right?
Right.
Because a lot of people watch podcasts. Most people that watch a podcast, they're coming back for the personalities and not for interviews.
Most of the time when you talk about podcasting and rap, at least, you have interviewers and then you have hanging out with the homies talking, or not the homies, but the co-hosts, Right. So Joe's like very, very much the king of hanging out with the homies talking, right? But as an interviewer,
Rory and Mal
doesn't make that a huge part of his brand.
Rory and Mal will be in there for
top
you.
5?
No, I'm asking you.
No.
Okay. So who else is in the top 5? So it's you, Joe, Charlemagne, Ack. Who else? Who's 5th? Gilly, Wallow and Gilly?
I like those guys.
You think you're better than Gilly and Wallow?
I like them. I respect what they're doing a lot, but it's not my favorite podcast.
Okay. Do you think that there's parts of Gilly and Wallow's podcast that maybe you can't relate to because maybe it's just a little bit there's a lot familiar to us?
There's just a lot of like affirming the subject's statements. It's a lot of like, yeah. It's just not. It's not. To me, it's like I like to get to the snappy questions.
No, you know what it is? You know what it is? Do you like Drink Champs?
Got a huge amount of respect for Nori.
Do you like Drink Champs? See, you can't not talk your shit. Talk your shit.
I have a huge amount of respect for Nori.
But
is he my favorite interviewer? Probably not.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because they're not messy. Because they get people on there and they get to the center of people's stories. They talk to people. They celebrate people, right? They get to the center of it. When you watch Gilly and
Wallow, I
could
give you a much more nuanced critique off camera. But I refuse to disrespect people that I have huge amounts of respect for.
But when I'm telling you, sometimes, like when I watch Nori and them, and a lot of times, to be honest with you, these are not hard-hitting interviews, but these interviews are full of joy and life. And when Wallow does have to relate something to somebody, or Gilly does have to relate something to somebody, who they are culturally and the power that they have from their experiences, it always resonates with who they talking about. They're not going to get nobody on their podcast and ask them who they beefing with or which body they took down or how many ops they're going to kill on Saturday. They're not going to do that. They're not, because they have a cultural edict to be able to talk to these brothers in nourishing ways, right? So, like, I don't expect you to like that, but it's really interesting that you have a problem with a podcast that really...
Don't drag me into this beef. I don't have a problem with them. I'm just talking about who I personally think are the top 5 podcasters. Who was the first name I said? I said Vlad.
Right.
Vlad, to me, does the best job of getting to brass tacks. You know,
he's a good interviewer.
Yeah,
I go on there all the time.
He's meticulous and detailed and informative, and that is something I aspire to. Mm-hmm. Every time I listen to a Vlad interview, there's usually a moment where I'm like, ooh, that was a fucking ill question right there. That was a perfect question that he just asked.
He's incredibly well-researched.
Sometimes it's his research team is probably helping him put together these questions and stuff like that, but I have a huge amount of respect for...
Let me ask you this.
There's a thing that people do on podcasts a lot. They'll be doing an interview. Let's go outside hip-hop. You know, I just drove to Palm Springs and back. I listened to a 4-hour Joe Rogan and Post Malone interview.
Okay.
This was the most normie-ass interview I've ever listened to in my fucking life. There was not one moment where Joe Rogan asked Post Malone anything that was specific to what it is like to be Post Malone or what it is like to be one of the most successful pop stars in the game. To me, that's kind of a waste of audio, of time. You know, they're having conversations about, AI is crazy. They're having conversations about, hunting and about, all these different things.
I'll be Post Malone. You interview me. You're Joe Rogan right now.
To me,
let's do it. Like, I'm Post Malone.
And I'm Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
I mean, while I'm...
Hold on. I'm Post Malone. Hold on.
While I'm watching it, I'm thinking to myself, of all the questions that I would ask Post Malone in that moment, to me, they had like a great 4.5 hour like bro down. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's like, I want to ask Post Malone the things that only he can answer in the best context that I can. And Joe Rogan clearly is not someone who gives a shit about that. He's perfectly happy to let Post Malone ask him about archery for 45 minutes.
Well, I mean,
I respect that. That's just not what I want to do.
Something else with Rogan's pod is that Rogan essentially does a pod where a lot of times he obviously he tailors the podcast to the interviewee, right? He asks him questions, but a lot of times the person that's coming on the Joe Rogan podcast is essentially a guest host of the Joe Rogan podcast. Mm-hmm. It's them going back and forth, and that's a different thing too. Like, because you have people that you interview, right, to where you're trying to dig and get to something, right? And then you have people that you come on there and they basically bro out with you as if they're on the podcast all the time. Joe's audience comes to the podcast for Joe Rogan. So really, he doesn't have to ask Post Malone anything. He can bring Post Malone into the Rogan verse and ask Post Malone about Biden or the ivermectin or any of those things, and his audience is going to like it just fine. Like, with you, there was a time where it was becoming like and I think now because of the whole cuck era or whatever you're going to call it, I think people are more interested. I mean, you said it. I wouldn't. Once again, I think it's a regular thing that porn couples do. But because of that, I think people are more interested in you. But I also think that you're more of a B-side interviewer like Vlad is. Vlad talks back to you more now. But when you're on Vlad, one of the things about going on there is it's really about you when you're on there. Mm-hmm. It really is about you. Vlad will go back and forth with you a lot, but Vlad asks me questions about my sister and all of that stuff. So I think that's probably a little bit different in terms of the way he would interview a Post Malone. This is the whole point. Like, when you say move the culture forward, I'm curious about what you feel like your responsibility to this culture is. Because when I think about move the culture forward, when you talk about something that makes a lot of noise, everybody is one crazy snapshot, crazy, for fucking incident. Like, we had Emmanuel Acho on the podcast, and me and Emmanuel Acho go back and forth because Emmanuel Acho is Nigerian and I'm whatever, and it's in the New York Post, right? It's a
who is that?
Emmanuel Acho is he's a sports commentator, right?
Okay.
So he's on there, and me and him start going back and forth, and all of a sudden it's in the New York Post, and everybody's talking about it, blah blah blah, because he's on Fox. He's on Fox and stuff. So you're always one interaction away from having something go viral.